Ali MacGraw was once the face of Hollywood innocence, the young woman whose performance in Love Story defined an entire generation. But behind the camera, her own story was far darker than any role she played. At the height of her fame, she found herself swept into the orbit of Steve McQueen, the man the world adored as the king of cool. Their romance began like a fairy tale, but it soon turned into years of jealousy, control, and heartbreak. Now, in her later years, MacGraw looks back on the relationship that both captivated and destroyed her with revelations that continue to shock fans of classic cinema. The rise of Ali MacGraw and the path to Robert Evans began far from the red carpets of Los Angeles. Born in Bedford Village, New York, she grew up in a home marked by conflict and instability. Her father battled alcoholism, and her parents' constant fighting left her struggling with self-confidence from an early age. Seeking escape, she turned to modeling, and under the guidance of editor Diana Velland, she broke into fashion. This step opened the doors to film, with her first screen role coming in 1969's Goodbye Columbus. The romantic comedy became a hit, and MacGraw's performance caught the attention of Hollywood insiders. It was during this period that she met Robert Evans, a successful producer who was then head of production at Paramount Pictures. Evans saw something extraordinary in the young actress and decided to cast her in Love Story. Released in 1970, the film became a cultural phenomenon. With its heartbreaking tagline, "Love means never having to say you're sorry," the movie grossed more than $100 million worldwide and transformed MacGraw into one of the most sought-after actresses of the decade. Her performance as Jenny, the doomed student who captured Ryan O'Neal's heart, cemented her status as a leading lady. Behind the scenes, her relationship with Evans quickly blossomed. They married in 1969, and in 1971, they welcomed their only child, Joshua. Professionally and personally, it seemed as if Ali MacGraw had everything: a thriving career, a powerful husband, and the joy of motherhood. Yet destiny was about to pull her in another direction. By 1972, Hollywood was buzzing about The Getaway, an action film directed by Sam Peckinpah and starring Steve McQueen. Evans secured the role of McQueen's wife for MacGraw, a decision that would change the course of her life forever. At first, she hesitated, worrying about leaving her young son. But as she later admitted in her 1991 memoir, Moving Pictures, the real reason was different. She already sensed the danger of working so closely with McQueen. "I knew I was going to get in some serious trouble with Steve," she confessed. And she was right. When Ali MacGraw arrived on the set of The Getaway in 1972, she was still married to Robert Evans, and Steve McQueen was already a global superstar. McQueen, 12 years her senior, carried the aura of a man who had defied the odds. From a troubled childhood marked by abandonment to his rise as Hollywood's ultimate anti-hero, he embodied danger, rebellion, and charisma. For audiences, he was the king of cool, a figure who seamlessly blended his passion for motorcycles and race cars into his screen persona. For MacGraw, he was magnetic, almost impossible to resist. From the beginning, their chemistry was undeniable. MacGraw would later describe it as chemical, saying that when McQueen entered a room, men, women, and children alike would turn their heads. He had a presence that consumed everything around him, and MacGraw, despite her marriage to Evans, was swept up in his world almost immediately. Their affair began shortly after filming started in Texas, and it quickly became the most talked-about romance in Hollywood. The publicity surrounding their relationship boosted interest in The Getaway, which turned into a box office success. But while fans and the press celebrated the passion between the co-stars, the personal consequences were far more complicated. By the end of 1972, MacGraw filed for divorce from Evans, a scandal that reverberated throughout Hollywood. Evans, who had given her the role that made her famous, was blindsided by the betrayal. Their breakup later became a subplot in The Offer, the Paramount Plus series about Evans and the making of The Godfather. In July 1973, Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen married. Their union had the glamour of a Hollywood fairy tale, but the reality was far less romantic. McQueen insisted that MacGraw sign a prenuptial agreement guaranteeing she would not seek money in the event of divorce. More importantly, he demanded that she abandon her acting career entirely. At the very height of her fame, MacGraw stepped away from Hollywood to fulfill his expectations. She later admitted that she agreed out of fear of losing him, even though it meant silencing her own ambitions. At first, married life in Malibu seemed idyllic. Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen settled into a secluded beach house where they hosted barbecues, walked along the sand, and enjoyed the company of a few close friends. To the outside world, they looked like a glamorous Hollywood couple living the dream. But behind closed doors, cracks quickly began to form. McQueen carried deep emotional scars from his childhood. Abandoned by his father and sent away by his mother, he grew up distrustful, especially of women. Those insecurities resurfaced in his marriage. MacGraw recalled that his jealousy was constant, flaring up even if she so much as looked at another man. Yet paradoxically, McQueen himself openly flirted with other women and was rumored to have multiple affairs during their time together. One of the most painful sacrifices for MacGraw was giving up her career. McQueen, then the highest-paid actor in the world, told her he didn't want a working wife. He was the biggest movie star in the world, and he didn't want me to work, she admitted years later. Out of love and fear of losing him, she walked away from Hollywood. Instead of attending premieres and working on new scripts, she became a full-time homemaker, raising her son Josh from her marriage to Robert Evans while catering to McQueen's needs. In her memoir, she admitted she played cook, cleaning lady, simple woman to the hilt. The isolation began to weigh on her. Though she adored McQueen, his need for control made her feel increasingly trapped. His substance abuse only worsened the situation. He was known for drinking heavily and using drugs, while she herself began to struggle with alcoholism. What had started as a romance full of passion slowly became a relationship clouded by suspicion, anger, and unspoken resentment. By the mid-1970s, the fairy tale had unraveled. Their home, once a sanctuary, was now filled with tension and silence. MacGraw later reflected that she was terrified of being abandoned if she ever spoke her mind. So instead of standing up for herself, she stayed quiet and suffered. By 1976, the strain of Ali MacGraw and Steve McQueen's marriage could no longer be hidden. On movie posters and magazine covers, McQueen was still Hollywood's indomitable tough guy, the man who made millions dream of freedom behind the wheel of a Mustang and Bullitt or on a motorcycle in The Great Escape. But at home, the reality was far less heroic. His addictions had tightened their grip on him. He frequently disappeared into nights of drinking, drugs, and carousing, returning home volatile, withdrawn, or suspicious. For MacGraw, who had already surrendered her independence to meet his demands, the loneliness was suffocating. She began drinking more heavily herself, searching for relief, but only sinking deeper into despair. The rumors of McQueen's infidelities gnawed at her. Stories of flings with other women spread quickly in Hollywood circles. At first, she clung to denial, convincing herself that the charismatic man she had once adored was still there, buried beneath the anger and chaos. But soon the whispers became too persistent to ignore. The humiliation was crushing. Feeling unwanted and desperate for some measure of comfort, she admitted years later that she too began seeking companionship outside the marriage. What had once been a passionate union now devolved into a cycle of betrayal and bitterness, each wound cutting deeper than the last. By 1977, MacGraw's patience had run out. She told McQueen she wanted to return to acting to reclaim the career she had abandoned at the peak of her fame. Her confession was not only a desire for work, but also a declaration of selfhood. After years of suppression, McQueen's reaction was cold and final. According to biographer Mark Elliott, he told her, "In that case, we are filing for divorce." Those words shattered whatever illusion remained. They confirmed her greatest fear, that her voice and choices had never truly mattered to him. Determined to stand on her own again, MacGraw accepted a role in Convoy, directed by Sam Peckinpah. The decision made reconciliation impossible. Though they briefly attempted to patch things up, trust had already evaporated. In 1978, after 5 years defined as much by control and jealousy as by passion, the divorce was finalized. Only 2 years later, tragedy struck. In 1980, at the age of 50, Steve McQueen died from pleural mesothelioma, a rare cancer caused by asbestos exposure. His illness shocked the film industry and devastated those closest to him. For MacGraw, the grief was complicated. Despite the anger, the betrayals, and the pain, she had loved him profoundly. Looking back decades later, she admitted, "I wish we had both grown old sober." It was a heartbreaking acknowledgement of the life they could never have, a dream forever lost to addiction, pride, and an untimely death. When Steve McQueen died in November 1980, Ali MacGraw was only 41 years old, a widow of sorts even though their marriage had already ended. His passing shook her to the core. For years, she had feared abandonment, yet nothing could prepare her for the finality of death. Despite their bitter breakup, she admitted she had loved him deeply, and his loss left a void that haunted her. The pain of what they had endured and what they had lost fed into her own growing dependence on alcohol. Professionally, she tried to move forward. She took on new projects, including a role in the 1978 film Convoy and later a 14-episode arc in the primetime soap Dynasty in 1984. But the sparkle of her earlier stardom was gone. Hollywood had moved on, and MacGraw found herself typecast or overlooked. More importantly, she no longer had the energy to fight for her place in an industry that had once crowned her its brightest new star. By the early 1990s, her personal struggles came to a breaking point. Alcohol, which had once been a comfort, had become a cage. Realizing that she was on a destructive path, MacGraw entered treatment at the Betty Ford Center. There she began the long process of recovery, confronting not only her addiction, but also the emotional scars left by her marriages, her lost career, and her years with McQueen. It was a turning point, one that allowed her to reclaim her life after decades of turmoil. In 1991, she published her memoir, Moving Pictures, an autobiography. Honest and unflinching, the book laid bare her painful childhood, her tumultuous relationships, and the cost of fame. It became a bestseller, resonating with readers who saw in her story a reflection of their own battles with love, loss, and addiction. By 1994, she left Hollywood altogether, moving to Santa Fe, New Mexico.